Welcome back. In this second outcome, we turn from planning to technique, exploring the actual methods researchers use to gather and make sense of their data. Once you've got your research question, the next decision is how to answer it, and that means choosing your methods. Broadly, they split into two families: qualitative, which works with words and meaning, and quantitative, which works with numbers. Over this outcome, we'll look at the types and uses of each, the ideas of reliability, objectivity, and validity, and how to match an approach to your subject. And plenty of strong projects blend the two, which we call a mixed methods approach. Let's meet the two families properly. Qualitative research explores meanings, experiences, and opinions, giving you rich, detailed data that isn't numerical. Quantitative research measures and counts, producing figures you can analyze statistically. Ask a customer to describe how a shop makes them feel, and that's qualitative. Count how many customers return next month, and that's quantitative. The simplest way to tell them apart is the question each one asks. Qualitative asks why and how, digging into a topic in depth with a small number of people. Quantitative asks how many and how often, measuring across large groups. One gives you words and depth, the other numbers and breadth, and which you need depends entirely on your aim. Qualitative methods are all about gathering detailed insight from relatively few people. Interviews let you explore one person's views in depth. Focus groups bring people together, so shared and differing opinions surface in discussion. Participant observation has the researcher watching, and sometimes joining, a real setting. And content analysis studies texts, images, or media closely for their themes. A researcher sitting in on a team's meetings for a month is doing exactly this kind of close, in-context work. Quantitative methods, by contrast, collect numerical data from larger groups so results can be counted and compared. Surveys and polls gather responses from many people using set questions. Questionnaires often use closed, tick-box answers. Sampling picks a representative group from a bigger population, and statistical analysis then finds the averages, patterns, and relationships. A national poll asking thousands of voters a fixed set of questions is quantitative research in action. Matching method to purpose helps a lot here. Interviews are best for exploring views in depth, focus groups for comparing opinions within a group, and observation for studying real behavior in context, all qualitative. Questionnaires and surveys, on the quantitative side, are for collecting set answers and measuring attitudes across a population. Interestingly, content analysis sits in both camps, since you can read a text for its themes or count how often something appears. Here's a qualitative study in practice. An NHS trust wants to understand why some patients miss appointments, so it runs 12 in-depth interviews and 2 focus groups. What emerges are themes: transport problems, confusing letters, anxiety about test results that explain the why behind the behavior. What it can't tell you is what percentage of all patients feel this way, and that's a limitation worth remembering. For that, you'd need a survey. Now, a quantitative example. The Office for National Statistics wants to measure how UK households spend their money, so it surveys thousands of them with a structured questionnaire and a carefully chosen sample that represents the whole population. The results are numerical: average weekly spend on food, housing, transport, and so on, revealing clear trends and comparisons. What you don't get is the personal story behind each figure, which is precisely where qualitative work would step in. So, when should you reach for each? Choose qualitative when you want to understand experiences, feelings, or motives, Explore a new or little understood topic, or explain why something happens. Choose quantitative when you need to measure how much or how often. Spot trends. Compare large groups or test a hypothesis statistically. In short, qualitative for understanding, quantitative for measuring. However you gather data, three concepts judge its quality. Reliability is about consistency. Would the same method give the same results if you repeated it? Objectivity is freedom from bias. Are your findings shaped by the evidence rather than your own opinion? And validity is accuracy. Does the study genuinely measure what it claims to measure? Keep those three in mind and you can interrogate almost any piece of research. A dartboard makes these two ideas click. Imagine the bullseye is the true answer. Darts tightly clustered, but off to one side, are reliable, but not valid, consistent, yet consistently wrong. Darts scattered evenly around the center are valid on average, but not reliable. What good research aims for is tight and on target, both reliable and valid at once. Reliability plays out a little differently across the two families. In quantitative work, it means repeatability. The same questionnaire, under the same conditions, should give the same answers. In qualitative work, where experiences naturally differ, it's more about consistency of approach than identical outcomes. Either way, a clear, well-recorded method is what lets others follow your steps and trust the result. Objectivity is about keeping your own views from skewing the findings. Quantitative research chases neutrality through structured methods and standardized questions. Qualitative research takes a different line, accepting that the researcher inevitably shapes the study and managing that through transparency and reflection, what's called reflexivity. Being open about your own role and choices isn't a weakness here. It's actually a mark of rigor. Validity asks whether you're really measuring what you claim to. In quantitative research, you test whether a measure is sound. Does your survey genuinely capture satisfaction or something else? In qualitative research, you check that your findings truly reflect participants' experiences and meanings. It's also worth splitting internal validity, whether the study is sound in itself, from external validity, whether the results apply beyond your particular sample. Laid side by side, the differences are clear. For reliability, quantitative aims for identical, repeatable results, while qualitative aims for a consistent approach. For objectivity, quantitative leans on neutral, structured methods, while qualitative manages bias through transparency. And for validity, quantitative tests whether it measures what it should, while qualitative checks that it reflects real experiences. Same three ideas, applied in two rather different ways. Let's ground all this. A college surveys students about their satisfaction with online lessons. Reliability shows up when the same survey a week later gives very similar scores. The tool is steady. Objectivity comes from neutral, closed questions that don't nudge people towards an answer, and validity from questions that clearly measure satisfaction rather than, say, their internet speed. Slip in a leading question like, "Wasn't the lesson great?" and both objectivity and validity would collapse. Let's weigh qualitative research honestly. Its merits are real. Rich, in-depth information, a feel for individual difference and context, and access to experiences and ideas that simply won't fit into numbers. But it has limits too. You can't analyze it statistically. The small samples make it hard to generalize. It's time-consuming to gather and interpret, and it's more open to the researcher's influence. Depth, then, but not breadth. Quantitative research offers the mirror image. It can be analyzed statistically, it identifies trends and patterns, it gives testable, generalizable results, and it's excellent for overviews and comparisons. The catch is that it can miss depth, meaning, and personal context. Poorly worded questions produce misleading numbers, and it struggles to explain why a pattern exists. It also only works well with large, representative samples. The best method really depends on the subject and the question, not on which family is somehow superior. Sciences and economics often favor quantitative data for measurement and testing. History, sociology, and the arts lean towards qualitative depth and interpretation, and business and health frequently use both. Numbers to size a problem and words to explain it. The question to ask yourself is simple. Does this need measuring or understanding? Take a retailer puzzled by a new product that's selling poorly. The quantitative side, sales data, and a customer survey shows how many people buy it and where sales are weakest. The qualitative side, interviews and focus groups, reveals why, perhaps the price, the packaging, or confusion about what the product even does. Put together, the numbers locate the problem and the words explain it, which is why a mixed methods approach gives the fullest answer here. So, where does that leave us? Neither approach wins outright, because they answer different kinds of question. Quantitative gives you breadth, comparison, and statistical testing. Qualitative gives you depth, meaning, and context. The real skill is judgment, choosing the approach or the mix that best fits your particular question, subject, and resources, and being able to justify that choice. Let's pull the outcome together. Research methods fall into two families: qualitative for words and depth, quantitative for numbers and breadth, each with its own toolkit of interviews, focus groups, surveys, and the rest. Three ideas judge their quality: reliability as consistency, objectivity as freedom from bias, and validity as accuracy, and each works a little differently in the two approaches. The bottom line is that the right method depends on your question and your field, and many of the best projects combine both. And that wraps up our look at research techniques. You should now feel confident telling qualitative from quantitative work and judging the quality of both. If you want to dig deeper, the reading list offers trusted method guides from Saunders and Denscombe, journals like Qualitative Research from Sage, and the ONS website for large-scale UK data, along with case studies such as the 2021 Census and NHS Patient Experience Studies. It's all gathered on the unit's Moodle page, so do explore it before you start the assignment.